Last year, Boston began a journey towards zero waste. This follows previous efforts to increase recycling, but the city also faces new challenges, especially from the economics of recycling and the growing threat of climate change. To bring us up to date is the director of the Zero Waste Project and senior fellow at the Conservation Law Foundation, Kirstie Pecci. Thank you very much for being with us, Kirstie.
Thank you very much for having me, Chris.
I want you to start with the one thing that I think a lot of people in Boston are going to be very concerned about, and I guess that's the cost of having a trash taken away, or recyclables, as the case may be.
Right.
What do you expect?
Well, the cost of waste disposal, and by disposal I mean landfilling or incinerating, Boston's waste is incinerated, has been rising steadily over time. The city is in a contract right now to pay $70 a ton for waste disposal, but I think that that's going to increase over time. There are negotiations about what that cost will be. So we're talking about 190,000 tons of residential waste that Boston is responsible for disposing of every year. It's about $13 million is the total cost. I think we're going to see an increase to more around $19 million, more like $100 per ton.
Well, the new concern here is about the net cost of recycling. What's changing?
So it's actually a really excellent question and a really complicated question. So let me answer it in a couple of parts. When recycling started in the 90s, we had fewer different types of goods that were recyclable, and we separated more. And remember that putting something into your bin doesn't mean to recycle it. That's just the separation part of it. What we need to do after that is actually take that good and bring it to a market and have it be made into, if it's a bottle, make it into another bottle. What's happened over time is the waste companies turned towards what's called single stream. And they did that for a number of different reasons. They sold it as an idea that would increase the amount of recyclables that would be diverted from the waste stream. So that 190,000 tons I was talking about, taking that out. Right now, Boston is recycling about 50,000 tons a year. Actually, if you look at what is recyclable and compostable for our waste stream, about 80% of it, of that 190,000 tons, is still compostable and recyclable. So we're not doing a great job with that. But the idea was, if we went to single stream, maybe we would take more of those recyclables out. Instead, unfortunately, what happened is that the quality of the recyclables, the plastic, the metal, the glass, and the paper and cardboard, became degraded by that mixing. So now we can't sell each of those waste streams for as much to be recycled, and the bottles can't be made into new bottles, for instance.
Well, what about the demand for those recyclables, even around the world?
Well, that's also an excellent question. What was happening for a while, and one of the reasons that the waste companies wanted to go to single stream, was that China was sending us goods, and then we had empty containers going back, shipping containers going back, and we filled them basically with the recyclables. And China was accepting our mixed plastic and our mixed paper, which, because it was single stream mixed plastic and mixed paper, was not that valuable and not that clean. And what I mean by that is, if you take paper and cardboard, for instance, and put them in your blue bin, they're going to degrade the quality of the containers. Glass containers, the glass gets into the paper and cardboard, for instance, it inevitably breaks in the processing of those materials. And as a result, our local processing for, say, paper and cardboard no longer exists because it was all going over to China. And China then built their markets up, created the recycling system in China, and now they no longer want our poorly separated and poorly sorted recyclables. So they are no longer accepting mixed paper and mixed plastic especially.
I know there's only so much one city can do about a worldwide market, but the best deal for Boston, I mean, do we have to go back to splitting things up again?
Well, I would recommend, separation, if you break an egg and you mix it up, it's hard to separate it out again, right? If you want to keep things dry and clean and have as high as market value as possible, I would recommend separating things out. In fact, in Springfield, where they have a materials recycling facility that's dual stream, they are still selling their materials. So and for instance, bottle bill containers still are being processed. So the better we do with our separation, that's definitely true. But actually, the city of Boston has gone a step further, which is fantastic. What the city of Boston has done is started this zero waste planning process. And so we're waiting now on the report from that planning process, which included public engagement, stakeholder engagement, and the city has a plan for, remember, our zero waste hierarchy is first reduce, then reuse, then recycle and compost, and then dispose. So the city has actually been putting a plan together with the assistance of their consultants, Perlmutter and Associates, and I'm looking forward to a very excellent plan. I think it's going to be one that will be transformative and save the city a lot of this tonnage. The other problem, though, is that because China has closed its doors and much of Southeast Asia has closed its doors to unsorted recyclables, what that means is that we don't have as many markets as we did, right? But then also what it means is that the waste companies are still stuck with this single stream system that they instituted, and it's causing them to have to sort the materials over and over again. And so they're trying to raise the costs on municipalities. Right now, the city of Boston has just received a bid from Casella recently, and they're in negotiations with Casella. And my understanding that the contract that the Casella has now with the city of Boston was a ceiling of $35 per ton on single stream recycling processing, that tipping fee. And it's now that new bid, what I've seen is a range of $125 a ton to $145 a ton for single stream recycling. So it's become even more crucial that the city of Boston take those other steps to reduce, to compost, and to clean up its recycling. But I also feel very strongly that the waste companies are not being good partners to cities in this case. And we've seen this in other municipalities as well. Boston is not the only one.
In what sense are they not good partners?
Well, for instance, the counselors from the city of Newton have told me that Waste Management, who they're working with, has said, because your contamination levels are so high, we're going to charge you more over this next year for your single stream recyclables. I've also been told that by people working for the city of Cambridge, that Waste Management told them they will also be charged more for their single stream recyclables. Now, the waste companies are saying this is because people aren't doing a good job sorting their recyclables. But what isn't being talked about is the fact that these municipalities have asked for audits in the past to look at their contamination levels. These municipalities in the past were told put more in than less, and now suddenly everything's been turned up on its, turned on its head. And there's no admission by the waste companies that even if you're a great recycler, and my husband yells at me for this all the time, many of us wish cycle, right? We put stuff in because it has a triangle on it, so you assume that it's recyclable. That's not a good standard for us to use now because this system is broken. So instead, there needs to be an admission that if something's not recyclable, for instance, polystyrene, styrofoam, which is number 6 plastic, there's no market for it. It's not recyclable, and it's very, very dangerous. It's a very dangerous material. That should be banned. Plastic grocery bags, while in theory they're recyclable, they are recyclable in the lab, there is not a good market to make bags into bags. And we shouldn't be using, and we should be using reusable grocery bags. So those are all, ways that we should be doing. The waste companies and the government and we as consumers have to do a better job.
This is BNN News. We're talking with Kirstie Pecci from the Conservation Law Foundation. Kirstie, more recycling volume and less volume going to landfills, it saves money. But what about the effect on the environment, especially now that we're so concerned about climate change? Is there a significant factor here?
Waste is one of when you include the upstream impacts, waste is one of the best ways that we can fight climate change. And by waste, I mean instituting zero waste programs. First of all, the food waste piece of it, which we've talked about before on this show, the food waste piece of it, not only does it create methane in landfills, but also composting sequesters carbon and then preserves soil, and it has many climate change impacts, the growing part of it too. The waste part of looking at what's actually recyclable and banning the materials that are not recyclable and requiring 100% recycling of certain materials is really important, because we don't want to be using virgin petroleum to make plastic. In fact, we should be using as little plastic as possible. We want to keep that oil in the soil. All plastic is made from petroleum products. Unfortunately, the plastic industry and the petroleum industry are pushing against that entirely, because we have subsidies in place so that fracked gas is then making plastic. And that's what we need to be, so the climate change impacts of not using plastic are huge. Also, if we're recycling our paper, we're not cutting down a new tree. You know, no matter how you do the analysis, it's better to be reducing. If you don't use it, there's no climate impact, right? Reusing, because it's better to wash out a bottle than it is to melt a bottle down or melt glass down to make a new bottle, for instance. And then also recycling, so that we're not using virgin materials.
Well, here in Boston, we recently started phasing out plastic bags at stores. How has that been working out?
That's been working out really well. I'm sure there have been incidences where there have been some issues, but according to the Commissioner for the Environment of the City of Boston, Carl Spector, and also according to Councilor O'Malley, who both testified at the statewide, the committee hearing last week at the State House to put a plastic bag ban in place, they both testified that it's going really well, that there's reduced litter. And remember, too, that bags, anything that's filmy, anything tangles, mucks up the works of single stream recycling. That conveyor belt gets caught up with the bags. So that's been very helpful as well. So it's going really well, and I think it's really an example for the rest of New England.
And finally, people want to keep up with this campaign, the Conservation Law Foundation. You got some place online where they can do that?
Absolutely. Our Zero Waste Project has a landing page, of course, and we have blogs all the time talking about all the different plastic-free New England work that we're doing in all 6 New England states. And then also the City of Boston has a great Greenovate page regarding their Zero Waste Project. And I'm really excited to see the report. And I really hope that that citizens will support the City of Boston in this great campaign. The city is really trying to do the right thing, and we need to have their back so that they can, so that they can.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Kirstie Pecci from the Conservation Law Foundation.